Chapter 33, Carl Boyles and Thomas Little. Norman Buckley was drunk and itching for a fight when he slid into a metal folding chair in the television room on the 5th floor of A Cell House. It was 7 p.m. and Thomas Little had just turned the channel to America's Most Wanted, a weekly program that reenacted actual crimes and asked viewers to call a toll-free number if they could help solve them. Little had asked the other 10 convicts in the room if they objected to his tuning in the show. None had, but that was before Buckley came in. "This is a fucking snitch program," Buckley bellowed. No one in the room reacted. Oh, looky look, there's the rat number on the screen to call," Buckley continued. "Everyone, grab a pencil and write down the rat number." 2 or 3 inmates, sensing trouble, left. "Fucking show is turning everyone into a goddamn snitch. Shouldn't be watching this motherfucker." An inmate sitting near Buckley turned toward him. "You calling me a rat?" he asked angrily. "'Cause if you are, then we need to deal with it." "I'm saying this is a fucking rat program," Buckley replied, not backing down. "And we shouldn't be watching it." "I'm not going to watch it." Buckley left the room. The next morning, Carl Boyles woke up angry. "What fucking right does Buckley have to tell me what I can and can't watch on television?" he asked Little. "Come on, Carl. He was drunk, and this ain't worth the trouble," Little replied. For the rest of that morning, Boyles and Little avoided Buckley, but that afternoon, it was Little's turn to get upset. He and a few other inmates went to the television room to watch the afternoon movie, but Buckley had turned the channel to MTV. He and a few other convicts went to the television room to watch the afternoon movie, but Buckley had turned the channel to MTV, and even though he wasn't in the room, no one wanted to risk changing the channel. They were afraid of him. Each floor of A Cell House had 2 television rooms, and each was large enough to accommodate 40 inmates. According to Bureau policy, inmates were supposed to select programs based on a vote of the men who watched the television. But this democratic process simply didn't work. All the television rooms in the cell house were controlled by blacks, except for the one on the 5th floor used by Boyles, Little, and Buckley. No votes were taken in. Instead, inmates wrote down their preferences on a sheet of paper hanging near the television. On this particular afternoon, Buckley had claimed the afternoon time slot as his. After several minutes of grumbling, Little marched up to the sign-up list and wrote the word "vote" across the entire page. "Anyone who thinks they are running this television room is wrong," he declared. "You can tell them to stick it in their ass. This is a public room." Then he went to Boyles to tell him what he had done. Within an hour, Buckley confronted Little and Boyles in the television room. "Carl," Buckley began, "I've known you for years, and I got all the respect in the world for you. And I don't disrespect you, and I don't ever mean to disrespect you." Then he turned and faced Little. "But you," Buckley said, his voice rising in anger, "you I don't know, and you're a fucking asshole." Having disrespect Little to his face, Buckley stepped outside the television room and waited for Little to join him. But it was Carl Boyles who came through the door. "Why did you call Tom an asshole?" Boyles asked calmly. "Because he spoke behind my back," Buckley replied. "As long as I've been around Tom, and as much as I've been around him, I've never heard Tom say nothing behind your back," said Boyles. "As long as I've been around Tom, and as much as I've been around him, I've never heard Tom say anything behind your back," said Boyles. "And he won't say nothing behind your back that he won't say to your face." "Then why ain't he out here right now?" Buckley demanded. "'Cause I told him not to come out." "Well, the only reason why I'm letting this ride is out of respect for you," Buckley said. "The kid I don't respect." This is how Boyles later recalled his reaction. "I told him, hey, don't cut Tom any room because of me. Tom catches what he catches. If he disrespects you, then you take it to him and deal with it. I got no problem with an ass kicking, but I ain't gonna stand by and let you kill my friend over a fucking television show. That's stupid for both of you. It's not a killing offense. An ass whooping, sure, but a killing over a television show, it don't call for no killing." Both men went to their cells. This was because of the nature of the hot house. While Boyles and Little insisted that they were only friends, other inmates looked upon Boyles as Little's guardian. If Boyles stood by and watched Buckley beat Little, other inmates would think that Boyles was afraid of Buckley. They would begin insulting him as well as Little. The code required that Boyles would have to kill Buckley if he raised his hand against Little. Buckley would understand all these consequences. He would have to kill Boyles before he could touch Little. A few hours after the confrontation in the television room, Little knocked on Buckley's cell door and quietly asked to come inside. He had come, he said, because Boyles had sent him to deal with the problem. This is how Buckley later recalled the conversation. "Listen, kid," Buckley began. "You got no respect coming from me, because you're riding on Carl." "You're a punk," said Buckley. "I talked to Carl, not you." He then dismissed Little. For the next several days, Buckley and Boyles watched each other. Each was waiting for the other to make a move. In the hothouse, no one fought by the Queensberry rules, especially convicted killers such as Buckley and Boyles. When guys like Buckley and Boyles get into a fight with another inmate, it only lasts a few seconds, because they're going to rip out a guy's windpipe with their first blow and rip off his nuts with their second. For his part, Little stayed close to Boyles. In fact, he never left his sight. All of this was going on, of course, without the guards having any idea that the two murderers were facing off against each other. And then fate intervened. Late one night, a guard caught Buckley's winemaking partner drinking in his cell. As Buckley watched, the guard hustled the inmate down the tier toward the hole. Buckley knew that his friend had hidden a large plastic container of hooch in his cell and wanted to get it before the guard came back. But Buckley needed a jigger, someone to watch for the guard. The only white inmates available were Boyles and Little. Buckley asked them to help, and they agreed. "Helping him had nothing to do with our disagreement," Little later recalled. "I hoped he had dropped dead, but this was a convict versus police thing with the wine, and I wasn't doing anything to get him busted." No one mentioned the television room incident again. Years earlier, such a peaceful standoff would have been unlikely, but neither Boyles nor Buckley wanted to be sent to Marion, and both realized that a fight between them could only end with one of them dead. But Boyles also understood that Little's trouble with Buckley was a prologue to what was to come, and in a sense, it was his fault. He had taught Little that the only way a convict got respect in prison was by being willing to kill. Like a child taking his first step, Little was now beginning to test Boyles' theory. He emulated Boyles, but there was a major difference between the teacher and student. No one questioned that Boyles was a killer, but Little had never killed anyone, and other inmates still saw him as Boyles' sissy. But there was a major difference between the teacher and student. No one questioned that Boyles was a killer, but Little had never killed anyone, and the other inmates still saw him as Boyles' sissy. "Tom ain't no coward, and he ain't no sissy," Boyles said. "People are misjudging him, but I don't want him put in a situation where he's going to have to grab a mop wringer and kill someone in here just to prove himself. He don't need to get himself in a beef to show he's a man. The best thing to do is get Tom transferred." By the fall of 1988, Boyles had received replies from the jailers, attorneys, and the judge in Florida familiar with Little's case. All of the letters showed that Little had never been charged or convicted of escaping from jail. Clearly, the Bureau had made a mistake sending him to the hothouse. Boyles had taken the evidence to Little's case manager and to his prison counselor, and both had agreed to recommend that Little be transferred to a lower security prison. Every 90 days, inmates were reviewed by a unit team that noted their progress or lack of it. Little's team consisted of his case manager, his prison counselor, and the A cell house manager, Eddie Gouge. Boyles figured the deck was stacked in Little's favor and he would get his transfer. But when Little came out of his 5-minute session, he was upset. Gouge had nixed the move. Originally, Little had been told that he would have to spend 5 years in Leavenworth. After studying the letters that Boyle had collected for Little, Gouge was willing to reduce Little's stay to 2 years, but that was it, no immediate transfer. Gouge later explained that he didn't like the way Boyles was orchestrating Little's affairs. "It's dangerous to allow one inmate to run another inmate's life in here," Gouge said, and that was what Boyles was doing. Gouge said that Boyles was making Little into a replica of himself. If that's what Little wants, to be a miniature Carl Boyles, then he belongs here, not a lower level prison. Part of the reason why Gouge was irritated at Boyles was because a few weeks earlier, Boyles had asked for permission to meet Little's mother. This woman was coming to visit her son, and she wanted to know why her son was living in a cell with a convicted murderer who spent 23 years in prison, Gouge recalled, and Boyles wanted to be the one to explain it to her. Little's mother was the only person curious about her son's relationship with Boyles. Other convicts were grumbling, particularly homosexuals, who are not allowed to share the same cells as their lovers. Carl Boyles is dangerous. The reason Boyles and Littles are allowed to cell together is because I believe in putting people into cells who are compatible, not because they are homosexual lovers, he said. Homosexuality is a product of this environment, but the Bureau does not condone it, and neither do I. In this case, Matthews continued, I think we've let this situation go too far. It does look like we are promoting homosexuality, especially when we assign Boyles and his sissy to the same job outside the hospital. It would have been better if one worked in industry and the other somewhere else, but for some reason, someone decided to put them together. Maybe it was to keep Boyles happy, I don't know. But the point is that we are treating them differently from other inmates, and I really don't believe in doing that, and I plan to look into it. Carl Boyles knew that he and Little were running out of time. Even though Connor had fired them as caretakers of the hospital grounds, they are still working as a team, collecting trash in another section of the compound. If Matthews and Associate Warden Connor decided to split them up by reassigning Littles to a job in prison industries, Little would be tested by other inmates. These dumb motherfuckers are going to put Thomas in a situation where he's not going to have any choice but to stab someone, and then they're going to say, see, we knew he belonged in the penitentiary all along, Boyles complained. The problem was that edgy gouge, Boyles decided.